Most people believe they make their own choices, but rarely ask who or what is doing the choosing. That thought haunted me for years. I'd walk through the world, smiling on cue, chasing goals that looked good on paper. But in the quiet hours, I felt like a stranger in my own life. We live in a culture obsessed with self-improvement, productivity hacks, confidence boosters, step-by-step guides to becoming the best version of yourself. But what if the self you're trying to improve isn't really yours? What if it's just a patchwork of roles, expectations, and old survival mechanisms, worn like armor but hollow inside? That question led me down a strange and powerful path into the depths of Jungian psychology, where the true self isn't something you perform. It's something you remember, something you uncover, layer by layer, through a process Carl Jung called individuation. In this psychological exploration, titled Carl Jung and the Power of the Self, we'll dive into the hidden architecture of the human psyche. We'll explore the shadow, the persona, and the long and harrowing journey towards self-realization. We'll confront the lies we tell ourselves, the darkness we try to ignore, and the deeper self waiting beneath all of it. Not perfect, but whole. This is more than shadow work. It's the psychology of liberation. Welcome to the world of Jungian psychology, where transformation begins, not with who you want to be, but with who you really are. If the search for self-awareness speaks to you, subscribe and turn on the bell. These are the kinds of questions that don't leave us unchanged. In the late 19th and early 20th century, a Swiss psychiatrist named Carl Gustav Jung dared to propose that there was more to the human mind than logic, reason, or repressed trauma. He saw consciousness as only the tip of the iceberg, the ego a fragile raft drifting atop an ocean of symbols, dreams, instincts, and archetypes. Unlike his contemporaries, Jung didn't believe in simple fixes or one-size-fits-all labels. Instead, he believed each human being carried a blueprint, a kind of inner myth, waiting to be lived out through the process of personal growth and deep psychological integration. He called it the path to the self, not the ego, not the mask, not the roles we perform for others, but the authentic, unified whole that lives beneath it all. And yet, this path is not easy. To find the self, we must pass through the shadows. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Carl Jung, there's a part of you you were told not to look at. It's the part that gets angry too quickly, that envies, that fantasizes, that judges. The part you pretend doesn't exist until it shows up uninvited in the middle of an argument, a breakup, or a dream you can't explain. Jung called this the shadow, the unconscious repository of everything we repress or disown. It's not just our darkness, it's our unlived life. The truth is, most people are terrified of their shadow. And why wouldn't they be? It contains all the parts of us we were taught to hide: rage, lust, selfishness, fear, even ambition. We're told to smile, behave, be reasonable, and so we split ourselves in half, the acceptable self and everything else buried deep. But here's the paradox: the more you suppress your shadow, the more power it gains over you. Shadow work and the mirror of the self-shadow work isn't about indulging darkness. It's about making peace with it, seeing yourself clearly even when it's uncomfortable. The process is delicate, often painful, but profoundly liberating. It's when you realize that your jealousy is rooted in a desire for worth, that your rage hides deep wounds, that the parts of others you judge most harshly are often the parts of yourself you've buried. I remember the first time I confronted my own shadow. I just lashed out at someone I loved, not because of what they did, but because they mirrored something I hated in myself. That night, I sat in silence, cracking open Jung's Ion, and saw the words leap off the page. The shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality. That was the turning point, not in the behavior, but in awareness. It wasn't just about controlling impulses anymore. It was about understanding them, the shadow in everyday life. The shadow doesn't just live in therapy sessions or in dramatic life events. It shows up when we overreact to harmless comments, when we sabotage relationships that feel too good, when we can't celebrate someone else's success, when we find ourselves stuck in the same toxic patterns again and again. These are clues, psychological fingerprints of a shadow trying to be seen, and seeing it doesn't mean losing control. It means reclaiming control. Integration allows us to stop projecting, to stop repeating, to heal. Shadow and light, a path to wholeness. In Jungian psychology, the self is not just light, wisdom, or peace. The self is wholeness, and that includes the dark. When we embrace our shadow, we gain access to our full power, creativity, intuition, assertiveness, even joy. These often return to us only after we stop hiding from who we really are. It's not about becoming someone new. It's about becoming real. The gold is in the dark, Jung once said. Shadow work is how we dig. She stood before the mirror, unsure if it was her reflection or her mask. If you've seen something tonight, a truth, a crack in the glass, don't turn away. Leave a sign, a whisper in the comments, a trace of you. This is your moment. Like, share, subscribe. Not to escape the darkness, but to walk through it with your eyes open. The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself and others think one is. Carl Jung, we all wear masks every day to go to work, to sit at dinner, to post online, to meet the world in a way that feels safe, accepted. This mask has a name in Jungian psychology, the persona. It's the socially acceptable version of you, the curated self, the one who smiles when you want to scream, the one who says, "I'm fine," when you're falling apart, and it's necessary, to a point. We all need a persona. Without it, society would crumble. You can't walk into a meeting or family gathering spilling raw emotion and unfiltered thought. But here's where it turns dark, when you forget it's a mask and start believing it's who you really are. Persona formation, cost of fitting in. As children, we learn what earns love and what earns silence. We internalize rules, we adapt, we split off the parts of ourselves that are too loud, too emotional, too ambitious, too strange. What's left becomes the persona, acceptable, polished, digestible. But if your persona becomes too rigid, you lose access to your authentic self. You become performative, you live for validation, and deep down a quiet emptiness grows. You wake up one day wondering, who am I, really? If no one were watching, no expectations, no audience, what would I say, feel, want, or do? The pressure of performing modern life amplifies the persona. Social media rewards images over substance. Workplaces value compliance over creativity. Culture sells narratives of success, beauty, and strength, often at odds with what you really feel. You end up trapped, smiling for the camera while screaming on the inside, and the longer you wear the mask, the harder it is to take off. Because people expect it, and because underneath you fear what you'll find. But Jung believed authenticity wasn't about being perfect or fully transparent. It was about integrity, an alignment between who you are inside and how you move through the world. The real you isn't a brand, it's a living truth. Becoming real again, to strip away the persona, isn't to be reckless or raw all the time. It's to choose when and how to be seen. It's reclaiming your identity from culture, trauma, and roles you never chose. Ask yourself, where am I performing right now? Who am I trying to impress? What parts of me have I silenced for the sake of fitting in? The answers will feel uncomfortable. That's how you know you're close to something true. When your inner self and outer self begin to align, something shifts. You feel less fragmented, less exhausted, more alive. This is where authentic living begins. In the small moments when you dare to speak, act, or feel from a place that is wholly your own. Individuation means becoming a single, homogeneous being. And insofar as individuality embraces our innermost, last, and incomparable uniqueness, it also implies becoming one's own self. Carl Jung, if the shadow is what we hide and the persona is what we show, then individuation is the sacred path that reconnects what's been split. In Jungian psychology, individuation is the process of becoming whole, not perfect, not fixed, but integrated. It is the lifelong journey of self-discovery, transformation, and authenticity. It's the inner pilgrimage back to the self, the true self, buried beneath adaptation, protection, and illusion. The stages of individuation. The journey of individuation isn't linear. It doesn't come with a map or guarantee. But Jung outlined several key stages that mark this profound psychological evolution, confronting the shadow. You begin by facing the repressed and disowned aspects of yourself. Anger, shame, desire, fear. Integration doesn't mean indulging these parts, but acknowledging and healing them, deconstructing the persona. You start peeling away the social masks and begin to live more honestly. This doesn't mean rejecting society. It means no longer letting it define your soul. Dialogue with the anima, animus. According to Jung, each of us carries an inner masculine, animus, and feminine, anima energy. Individuation involves reconciling these forces, allowing emotional balance, creativity, and depth, union with the self. This is not an end, but a state of being, when your conscious and unconscious minds begin to harmonize. When your inner world no longer fights itself, a difficult road, but a sacred one. Individuation often begins in crisis, in those moments when life shatters the identity you clung to. A breakup, a job loss, a depression, a confrontation with mortality. You lose who you thought you were, and that's when the true self begins to stir. It doesn't shout, it whispers. It speaks in dreams, symbols, body tension, synchronicity. You feel the tug towards something deeper, something realer than your goals or roles, and you begin to listen. What it feels like to individuate. Individuation isn't always euphoric. It's often lonely, disorienting, and slow. But then something shifts. You stop needing everyone to like you. You set boundaries without guilt. You embrace solitude instead of fearing it. You feel aligned, even when life is uncertain, because your foundation is no longer external. It's internal. You're not playing a part, you're being. This is the essence of self-realization, and once you taste it, even briefly, you can't go back to pretending. You feel it, don't you? That pull, that ache, that whisper from the depths. If this voice has stirred something in you, leave a sign. Comment, subscribe, not to join a trend, but to begin your own transformation, one only you can walk. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. Carl Jung began this journey with a question. What if the self you're trying to improve isn't really you? Now you know, the self is not a performance. It's not an identity handed to you by society, family, or fear. It's not your resume, your trauma, or your mask. The self, in Jungian psychology, is the totality of who you are. Your conscious mind, your unconscious drives, your dreams, your pain, your potential. It is your shadow, your soul, your story united. To live from the self is to live in integrity, to no longer hide, conform, or chase validation. It is to become whole, a journey, not a destination. There is no final moment when you are done. Individuation is a lifelong unfolding. Some days you'll feel aligned, others you'll feel lost again. That's not failure, that's growth. Each cycle brings you closer to your truth. Each shadow integrated adds strength. Each mask removed reveals light. The power of the self lies not in control, but in connection. Connection to your depth, to your intuition, to your purpose. Final reflections, a call to courage. This isn't an easy path. It requires courage to see what you've hidden and love to hold it. But once you start, once you awaken to the self, you stop living reactively. You stop running from pain and start listening to it. You stop pretending and start choosing. You become free. So ask yourself, what parts of me have I buried? What masks do I wear to survive? Who might I become if I stopped hiding? Then start small. Journal, reflect, explore dreams. Engage in shadow work. Read Jung. Seek out symbols. Pay attention to synchronicities. Find the golden thread of authentic living that's always been inside you, and follow it. This is not just personal growth. This is transformation. This is Carl Jung's gift, and now it can be yours. You've reached the edge of the known, but the self is an endless continent. If this exploration sparks something in you, don't let it fade. Explore our curated playlist on depth psychology, shadow work, and authentic living, linked below. But remember, the most powerful truths are not the ones we hear, but the ones we're finally ready to recognize. In the mirror, in the silence, in the self. Welcome to the beginning of who you really are. The rest is yours to discover. See you in the next video.